I think what I'd like to talk about is not necessarily case-specific information. That's been covered in pretty good detail with a lot of the New York Times articles, financial planning, and others. I think what I'd like to talk about is go a little bit into my background and discuss the actual implications to the individuals or to the American public at large. I began in finance in 1990. I had worked for Bank of America for quite some time. In 2000, I opened my own financial planning and investment management firm. Did that for a little over a decade. Like many others, I got caught up in some of the financial issues that come around in 2008, 2009, and 10, and people lost a ton of money, and frankly, I'm one of those as well. I think, looking in retrospect, who knows? I mean, if we all had we all have 20/20 hindsight. Foresight's a whole different deal. But I think that I began to work for J.P. Morgan in June of 2010. And when I began at J.P. Morgan, I started with an investment portfolio that was about $10 million. Over the subsequent 2.5 years, I grew that portfolio somewhere into $100 million. Now, I did that the old-fashioned way. I did that by taking care of my clients, because that is ultimately what's most important by me. If you take care of the people that I work with, and I work specifically in a retirement community, so many of you here could very well have been a client of mine. The people that I am trying to help protect are you. They are your friends. They are your family. They are your mothers, your fathers, your brothers, your sisters. And, what ends up happening, I think sometimes people lose sight of fines. We hear these fines, banks paying billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in fines. But those fines have faces and they have names. You may not know them because they're maybe embarrassed to say something. But to go back just a little bit, I work for J.P. Morgan. What they ended up, or what they wanted us to do, was push our clients into what are called proprietary products. Now, a proprietary product could have been a mutual fund, but in most cases, it had to do with something that was called Chase Strategic Portfolio. It is directly an investment managed product that's managed by the bank, and then the bank would stuff that mutual fund, stuff that managed portfolio with their own mutual funds. In some cases, up to 83.5% of their own accounts. So in essence, they're double dipping. They're charging you a fee to manage the product, and then they're getting a fee to manage the mutual fund in the product. When there are additional accounts that could have been had for much, much less as far as the fees were concerned. Well, that brings me to just prior to my promotion. So in June, I was June of 2012, well, I should go back, January 30th or 31st of 2012, I had a meeting with 3 managers. And those 3 managers I have recorded. I actually recorded the conversations. I've given them to regulators, multiple regulators, mind you. And they're telling me to push these proprietary products, in essence, if I want to get a promotion. And they say something to the effect of, well, you understand that, bank managed, this account, the accounts that you'll be selling are all bank managed products. Well, that's not ethical. And from a financial perspective, as a fiduciary in a managed account, we must do what is in the best interest of the client. Not that we want to or that we should. We are required by the law to do that. And anyhow, long story short, I get promoted. I had only been in the job less than 30 days, and my direct manager at the time had come to me and said, hey, you're not selling enough managed accounts. How many accounts have you opened? And at that time, I'd only opened 1. Mind you, I've been transferring in $3, $4, $5 million in big blocks of cash, and they are still just hounding on me to get these accounts moved over to these managed products. Well, long story short, I told them to shove it in an email. I was a little more polite than that, though. And I just told them I'm not going to breach my fiduciary duties to the clients. I'm just not going to do it. Literally 2 weeks later, there's an alleged transaction that they say, oh, you mismarked a trade. Well, unfortunately for them, the client sided with me, and they've since signed affidavits stating that that was completely false. Anyhow, long story short, I ended up getting terminated November 6th of 2012. And I knew what was going on. I didn't fall off a turnip truck. I kind of seen the writing on the wall. I was just hoping that they would leave me alone by going to the management team, but unfortunately they didn't. So they terminate me. Then they write up my securities license with these allegations for allegedly why they terminated me, and that ultimately blacklists somebody from the industry. You can't go hire at another brokerage firm. So you have a $100 million book of business. The bank wants to retain that book of business. So what do? They write up your securities license so you can't go license somewhere else and then transfer your book of business over. Now, FINRA, you guys know about this. I've brought it to your attention and many, many other regulatory agencies, so at some point, hopefully, you guys will listen. So the firm, I went to the media in March of 2013. It was the front page of the New York Times, and they chronicle the processes over at JP Morgan fairly well. It's called Selling the Home Brand. It's a great article written by Sue Craig. I think at that point, they were probably not too happy because within the next 60 days, I had 3 written client complaints against me. Now, that's interesting because in the prior 20 some odd years, I'd never had a written disclosable complaint on my securities license, ever. Now all of a sudden 3 pop up. I think, wow, that's interesting. Okay, so I file a complaint. We must go through FINRA arbitration, unfortunately. I lose in arbitration. I went, how on God's earth can that happen? We had HR documents stating that I was terminated. They made the decision to terminate me, on November 2nd. For documents they found on November 3rd. So either they have ESP or, I just don't know how 1 and 1 equal 2. So we lose. Okay, so I lick my wounds and I move on. We'd also, back in April of 2013, had filed a OSHA retaliation case, and that's how I come to ultimately meet Yesenia and a few other folks. But I lose the case. I think, well, you know what? That really stinks. I'll be honest, I wasn't real too happy about it. Come to find out, the person that testified under oath, she is, quote, the corporate officer, end of quote, and, quote, the supervisory manager, end of quote, for J.P. Morgan Chase. She is the voice of J.P. Morgan. Okay, she is J.P. Morgan, mind you. She said under oath, absolutely not. Nobody for J.P. Morgan had ever drafted client complaints. Well, that's wrong. I know it's wrong because I went and talked to those clients after the case. Every person alive has signed an affidavit stating what they said was false. More importantly, one of the clients cannot read or write. So, ask yourself, person signs these documents that can't read or write. Well, that's interesting. So, you would think that would be the end of it, but it's not. As time goes on, we fight. Long story short, I end up winning the OSHA retaliation complaint. I ended up, somewhere in the mid 6 figures for damages. I appealed the award, not J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan didn't appeal it, I appealed it. And the people go, are you crazy? Why would you appeal that? Well, because they owe me over $2 million in wages. So the answer is, I'm not somebody that is going to just sit back. I'm like many of you in the union. At some point, you have to stand up for what you believe is right. You have to stand up for the American people. If one person doesn't stand up, it's not my job. Well, guess what? We all lose. So what it really comes down to is the people have to take back or force the situation in some instances. And I think maybe I don't know that I'm that guy. I'm just a normal person. You know, I'm no different than any of you. And I just want to go to work. I want to do what's right by my clients and make an honest living. I don't know what's so difficult about that. And the accounts they had us selling, to kind of put this in perspective, could generate 1,067% more recurring revenue to the firm. 1,067%. That is not a typo. Almost 11 times the revenue. So you wonder how firms like J.P. Morgan make $100 billion a year? That's how. It don't take a rocket scientist to figure that, you know, if you're making $10 billion, for example, and you could generate another, you know, tenfold increase, you're at 100. So the thing that's interesting, and when I say J.P. Morgan, you know, we're talking about a huge global institution, literally largest in the United States, I think it is, by assets. And not every person at the firm is deceitful. There are a lot of good advisors. There are a lot of good people, just like you and me and whomever. It's not that. As Yesenia had talked about, it's the management team. It's those people that control the capability to do right by people. They do not pay a price. Their price is their annual bonus. What are they getting a bonus, right? So what did you receive in stock options or stock grants? You know, you cash out the register, cha-ching, when you get retired. And those are the ones that push these rules and these sales to the minions, you know, to the people in the field. And that really is what it's about. So the people need to stand up and they need to take it back. They need to say enough is enough. And I think that if those in the political power, those with the political will to do what's right by the American people, President Trump had mentioned that, you know, he wanted to do what's right by the American people. Well, now's your time. So President Trump, if you want to make real effective change, do not change Dodd-Frank. Do not repeal Dodd-Frank in whole.
But you know he doesn't want to do that.
Well, strengthen Sarbanes-Oxley. You know, strengthen the laws that help protect the American consumer. Don't repeal them, because that's not what this is about. This is about the American people being taken advantage of by a select few, the 1%. So what we need to do is we need to work together and make sure that the American people are cared for. There are a lot of people that are retired, and we're going to have a lot of baby boomers like many of you folks here. You want to know that somebody is looking out for your best interest, and that is what's important. So I think if we look at each other, and you look at the person next to you, look at the person to the right of you, look at the person behind you, those are the people that were, in essence, the reason for the fine. $307 million J.P. Morgan was fined for proprietary products issues. And there was a $60 million disgorgement by the CFTC. The SEC has done their job. The CFTC has done their job. FINRA, where are you? Not a single person has been reprimanded for those activities. Not a single manager for J.P. Morgan has been reprimanded for those activities, at least publicly. However, FINRA found fit to come after me, the person who went directly to their doorstep and said, hey guys, look at what I see going on here. And what do? They come after me because I made a $623.56 mistake. $367 million paid to the SEC and to the CFTC. Zero JP Morgan people have been disciplined. However, the self-regulatory organization known as FINRA decided to come after me for $623.56. Good job, guys. I hope you sleep well. So, what I have to say is that we need to stand together. We need to stand together as the American people. We need to press and push our congressmen. We met with some folks from California today, congressional members, and we're hoping that we can take this fight all the way to Washington. Something needs to change, and change starts with one person. Am I that person? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I can tell you this, I will not bow down to the wealthy at the expense of the weak. Just not who I am.